Can everyone hear me? Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. This is an evolution of API management at the BBC. Now, the BBC offers TV and radio and online services to a UK and global audience. In the UK alone, 92% of our adult population will hit the BBC in one form or another. Globally, we have a 376 million audience size. But behind the scenes, there are 20,000 people working tirelessly to bring these stories to our audiences. Our digital services range from homepage through to iPlayer and the newly announced BBC Sounds. You can see in our traffic trends, we're with people from the moment they wake up to the moment they fall asleep at night, be it via DAB radio or the news at 10. We're here to inform, entertain, and educate. But today, we're focusing on engineering. You know, I've been asked once by a physicist from Switzerland, what software does the BBC even need to build? You know, we need to remember that the BBC built one of the first video-on-demand platforms in the world. We have one of the largest historic archives at 50 petabytes in size, ranging back to the 1890s, and is growing at 10 terabytes a day. Our news and sports websites are trusted by our audiences across the globe, and we are one of the oldest digital businesses. You know, if we go back 20 years, we can look at the pinnacle of web design, Politics 97. We all miss GIFs. Let's admit, you know, this is the best. It's beautiful. Now, our teams are from across the UK and beyond, from Glasgow to London, Belfast and Cardiff, and where we're from, Salford and Greater Manchester. We have a strong culture of autonomous, agile teams, everyone working to grow and build the product that they know and love best. Behind the scenes of the kind of core 8 services you saw a second ago, there are 2,000 plus service components. They're all focused on digital delivery. Every day, in our cloud platform alone, we say 1,200 deployments. And that's just AWS. It doesn't include GCP, Azure, and our on-prem solution. Now, my name is Nathan Brock. I'm the Principal Software Engineer for BBC API Management.
I'm Rafal Jachimczyk, Senior Software Engineer. Been with BBC for 4 years.
And today we want to share our experiences. You know, what we felt we did right, what we feel we didn't, you know, do quite so right. We want to share that experience with you. And I'm sure you've all experienced it in one way or another, either directly or indirectly as a client. Now, we're always evolving our process. You know, we have a culture of learning within the BBC. You know, it's in our lifeblood to innovate and to collaborate. And it's worth noting that API management at the BBC is less about governance and more about support. We're building services to make the lives of our engineers easier. So I'm going to hand over to Raf now, who's going to talk about looking back 4 years ago.
Thank you. So 4 years ago, when I joined BBC, the situation looked more or less like this. We had various different services, be it microservices, APIs, video encoders, whatnot, UI applications, mobile apps, internal tools. Various different clients coming from outside of the BBC, inside, you know, staff using internal tools, journalists around the world, in China, and every other place in the world. So the question is, why do we need API management in the BBC? We have all those various microservices. We have autonomous teams. We have all different languages and BBC. We have multi-cloud environments. We have BBC on premises. So the question is, why do we need API management? We've noticed a pattern where the same functionality is rebuilt in silos. People wanted to know more about what's going on, how to onboard on services, and they started building functionality for log aggregation, onboarding, control, reporting. I'm sure you've seen the same patterns in your businesses. It's just been a bit of a chaos when everybody builds this in silos. So we wanted to have something more reusable. We wanted to have coherent integration processes and common onboarding process for it. It's important to say that we had some good stuff in the BBC already in place in the form of deployment system and mutual TLS system, which I'm going to talk about. So security, very important in the BBC. We already have this, you know, years in the past. We secure our services using mutual TLS. Some of you might already know what it is, but if you don't, it's a way where you have a server presenting its own certificate so that you know who the server is. But in mutual TLS way, it's also the client who presents its own credentials in the form of certificate. So mutual TLS very much built into ecosystem of the BBC. It provides end-to-end encryption as well, and it's just been there. So our job was slightly easier. So what did we do? Bearing in mind that we need all those services in the BBC, we bought an off-the-shelf solution. And for the time, it was very good. It slotted in between our applications, UI applications, mobile apps, internal tools, between APIs, because sometimes you have APIs stuck into APIs, video encoders and whatnot. It is very well-known architectural pattern. It's simple to implement, and what we've used initially for identities were API keys, so that we can start the journey of understanding what's going on. We can see traffic patterns, we can see things happening. And at the very beginning of our inception of the API management BBC, we've seen 2.2 billion transactions a week, and we quickly had the list of APIs growing to 70 plus. Bear in mind, this is not the whole BBC traffic. We are tool and service team who provide the software, so we kind of have to market our software to the rest of the BBC, hence the T-shirts and other stickers and stuff like that. So in the beginning, all was very good. All roads lead to Central. We've had easy setup, quick onboarding processes. We had all the teams needed to do was the simple change of the DNS to point to the proxy or the API gateway. They did not require any code changes. All the traffic was stored in one location, so we could start churning over the data. We had some good analytics. The onboarding process became very simple, and it created a notion of API management in developer heads and product managers' heads. It's a large organization, so it's just been the start of the journey, really, for us. So when we slotted it in the middle, it worked very well, but with the size of our organization, things quickly started to deteriorate. And we've noticed things like this, where you have one single team onboarding on the platform, and the team doesn't really know how to do it properly, maybe, or they didn't think to do something malicious, basically. They misconfigured a proxy on the API management layer. And what happened? Because it's a single point of failure, the middle bit, it kind of was a single point of failure, so we started to see in the fire clown on lots of our products. Single point of failure, it is what it is. When it goes wrong for everybody. And you could see alarming rate of errors and things. It's really hard to control the fallout as well, because the platform is shared, so everybody has the same right to change configuration on this platform, so it's really hard to see who's doing what. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Nathan, who's going to take you through the process of how we decentralize it.
Thank you very much. So taking a quick look at this, that fire cloud at the top is on our HTTP 500 page, or used to be. That is genuinely terrifying. When you log in to bbc.co.uk and you see that as an engineer, and you think to yourself, was that me? It is absolute fear. So we worked knowing these problems, knowing that the general purpose platform wasn't working for us. We were pushing the boundaries. It couldn't scale to our requirements. We needed a new architectural plan. So we started to decentralize the API management solution that we had. We had some requirements, an independently scalable solution. This was something, our teams, our API developing teams know their product best. They know their service, they know the spikes, they know when the most traffic is running through it. So give them the control, give that control back to the teams that know their product best. It needs to be reliable, so there's kind of isolation of service, a byproduct of decentralizing the proxy, putting it next to the service itself would make sure that a spike in one service wasn't at the detriment of another. It needs to be configurable. There's a very healthy CI/CD process within the BBC, so making sure configuration was code and integrating into our internal configuration platform. So making sure they can get that config in and straight out as part of their pipeline. And it should be extensible. The proxy itself should be as dumb as possible. Get a request from A to B. But the API management functionality that we provide should be an additional plugin, completely configurable, allow the teams to pick and choose what they need. Just applying good engineering practices, modularize what you need, switch off what you don't. But the architecture for the plugins should be allowed to be used by those teams as well. Allow them to embed into the proxy and add their own functionality. And it should be cost-effective, something that's not going to break the bank. We're publicly funded. The last thing we want is to spend multiple millions on something that is not effective. So we're going to distribute this proxy alongside the API management, the API service itself. So this is our old pattern, centralized model, single point of failure, a platform that, albeit works very well for a lot of use cases, didn't work for us. So we worked with our API management supplier for a new architectural model, as described, to our decentralized one. So API management now sits in front of each of the API services. This is nothing new. I'm sure it's something that's very familiar to everyone today. However, this was very new 2-3 years ago. So each of our proxies, each of our API services have the proxy, and it talks to the central source of truth. And this is the important part for us. This central source of truth is where our analytics go, where our product management sits, where the key validation takes place. So we have control, we have insights, we have analytics that provides us the insights that we require to continue to build services that are right for our teams. Now, if the single source of truth does go down, our proxies can fail open. As Raf mentioned, mutual TLS is the core of the authentication policy within the BBC. This is all internal traffic, although most of it is, so we can safely use MTLS. And if that service goes down, then our proxies continue serving traffic. On top of that, we're caching and syncing where possible. Now, obviously, we don't want that to go down with high SLA, but if it does, this proxy is built to prepare for that, just like any good microservice. The proxy itself was built in Node.js, rightfully or wrongfully. The important bit about Node.js was the developer buy-in. You may not get the proxy performance of closer to the metal languages, but having a massive community of developers was key to us. It worked for us, and it worked for the developers around the organization. They could start building plugins in a language that they were familiar with. We built the proxy around the existing API management providers' libraries, so we built on top of that. Out of the box, it again didn't tick those 5 boxes we went through a second ago. We wanted painless migration. We wanted it to work with our processes, configuration, deployments, RPMs, etc. And we wanted it to be transparent. 2-3 years ago, these kind of proxies would require things like Swagger definitions. They would require you to configure it in a way that we just wanted our teams to install an RPM and get it up and running using the existing data sets that they were using with the centralized service with the decentralized model that we were proposing. So the important bit, as I mentioned, was the value of the central source of truth. Redeveloping things like the BBC Developer Portal is important to our future roadmap. It integrates with our BBC processes and our authentication mechanisms. The general purpose platform, their RBAC model, given that the BBC is one BBC, but behind the scenes, it is nearly multiple organizations. You've got iPlayer, you've got sports, you've got news. They all work independently. So having one platform, one organization just didn't operate correctly. So we wanted to improve the RBAC model, use our own dev portal, and we were back in control of our own data models. We're starting to sync that data back from the central source of truth, which was our API management provider, into our own data stores. And this allowed us to create more value-added services that were performant and scalable. We could start identifying what our clients needed, what the API services required, and build these quickly and effectively. One of these was the SLA Monitoring. Analytics is key to any API management provider. But taking that data set and very quickly iterating over a requirement like this, so all our internal APIs has an SLA, and this was a way that they could get value out of the box. Given that they were already using our proxy and already collecting analytics, we could derive an SLA given the uptime and quality of those requests. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass over to Raf, who's going to talk about looking forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've had this simple ecosystem. Developers loved it. All they had to do was just include the RPM package in their deployment strategy, and they get the API proxy. It's easy to onboard. It's easy to consume APIs. And what we do is we help the teams build the products they love building and the products that provide the value. Most importantly, we started getting a lot of knowledge in-house. So we know what API management is, what other providers do, and it's really good experience as well to get that knowledge. And with that, we had a great appetite to build more and take it forward. As I said before, we've used API keys as initial way of identity for machines, but we started learning and we started seeing more things. So just to reiterate, all the teams that build those applications, they are autonomous. We provide software, and we are seeing that things are not, standstill. Everything is moving very fast in this sphere, and we don't want to become irrelevant in 2-3 years or even a couple of months. So we have to build value for them. As again I said, we have to market our own products. So I think the trends we're seeing now is where we have multi-cloud deployments. We have in BBC we use on-prem cloud. We have Google Cloud and we have AWS. So we have to deliver products and proxies and other systems that come into what we call API management or service management. Where necessary, we want to provide discrete services like telemetry services, authentication proxies and tracing proxies, all the systems that are part of the bigger ecosystem of API management in BBC. And they will use them as they see fit. For example, in things like Lambdas or Google Cloud functions. It's up to them how they consume the system. And yeah, we just want to stay relevant, really. If we just carried on with the provided solution, maybe we wouldn't have this knowledge and we wouldn't be talking today. What we started looking at in BBC as well, apart from just service-to-service communication, we look at user identity. As mentioned before, we have different types of identities in BBC. We have audiences, we have internal staff, but it's all kind of revolving around humans. So we built another proxy for user identity purposes, more user-friendly, more human-friendly. It integrates well with our API management proxy, so we have 2 layers, as you can see here. We have the user management sort of proxy and the API. Working with IDM that we have internally, BBC Login. And so why do we shift focus to from APIs to user identity? Because we have identified stuff like this, where it's really tricky to know if you deal sometimes with human or a machine. It might be a Time Lord, you don't know. So why it's important? Because users are not the same as machines. API keys are not security. So where do we going to take it next? We deal with these 2 types of identities. We have user identities and for humans, and service for software, like, for example, video encoders that need to talk to another services. And let me give you an example of that, where the boundaries are very easily crossed between the 2. For example, you build a front-end interface, and the tester in Jenkins hard codes or uses some secure configuration to store the username and password to test the system. So, hello, that's if that username and password gets leaked somewhere outside or even internally, maybe somebody will be able to see his paycheck or do something other malicious action like connect to Wi-Fi. So we really need to distinguish who is who. So we shouldn't be confusing these two types of identities. So we kind of move into how we solve this problem space. As mentioned before, we already use mutual TLS in BBC. Works really well. However, it doesn't have enough tooling, meaning that teams quite often build different mechanisms to solve this problem of reusable functionality, like logging or telemetry collection. So what we plan to do is enhance the TLS in the BBC so that both users and machines get similar kind of tokens or tickets so that we can create more coherent ecosystem where, for example, when the client creates a connection through this chain of frontends and APIs, the tokens are flowing. And we can issue tokens using the same microservice architecture for both machines and users. So maybe if we stayed with the provider, API provider technology, it wouldn't be possible because Conway's law. You want to really, sometimes you model your organization and how it works. Might work, might not, but seems to be, in certain degree work for us. What's important, we want to really move away from API keys to identify those services, because it's really easy to spoof those, and you want to have something that's more certain and that's signed. And if we do that already for users, why wouldn't we do the same for machines? So from those lessons, the question is, would we do it again? I think I would say yes, because we have a lot of knowledge now. Hopefully, it's something that's gonna better understand the trends around the systems available in for API management or service management. We built for the future of the BBC. With that knowledge, we can certainly say that it's easier for us. We have an internal team of 5 developers now who work on this. We still innovate. We like to think so, and there's some bad and ugly things in our stack, but at least it's ours, so we know where to take it. It's not to say that we are not looking at using external supplier technologies. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Nathan. He's going to have some closing.
Thank you very much. So we're always continuously evolving. There are times, very much at the start, and continuously, and probably right now, where I feel like we've got my pants on my head and pencils up my nose. But we're always iterating our service. We're always, reviewing what is requirements of our products and building services around that need. There's never any waste. We started off with a model that worked well for us. It worked well for our clients. This centralized idea. We moved from this, where API management didn't exist, to the centralized model, introducing a more coherent strategy, a more coherent onboarding process, introduce API management functionality that wasn't there previously, but it wasn't always good for us. It didn't work. We pushed those boundaries. So we distributed that software working alongside our API management provider, but while still retaining that central source of truth. While still retaining all those analytic data, information about things like user data and products information. And we were building a proxy that we expected that the central source of truth was going to be down. And in the future, moving forward, as Raf touched on, we want to decentralize these services further. We're currently in the works of the telemetry service to grab telemetry data from each and every one of our proxies across the network to further provide information going forward, so we can build a service that's going to last, hopefully, for at least another 100 years. Why not? That's worth mentioning, because we will be 100 years old in 4 years' time. That wasn't out of nowhere. So yeah, we're adding value through discrete functional endpoints. And it's worth noting that as you build, most of your engineers or even product managers or anyone in this audience, that when you're building, when you're involved in the structure itself, you're learning. Using something will only get you so far. We built quite a raft of knowledge over the years. We think and hoping we're evolving in the right direction. And we're really excited for the next 12 months. So big thanks to you for putting up with us for the last 20 to 25 minutes, to the Nordic team and everyone around. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.